Grüß, willkommen in einem Video. Welcome to another exciting video, in this case episode 45 by Figure Gaming video series. In this video, I'll be looking at how I created my initial 6mm ancient force mix, then changed my mind and tried a new basing system. From bitter experience, I've learnt that when you decide to try out a new scale and period of figure gaming, you need to do your research and have a clear reason or objective. If you wish to select 6mm ancients and you lack any other scale ancient figures currently in your inventory, then the reason for this can be anything you wish. From I like the look of 6mm, I like the feel of 6mm, and I saw someone with a 6mm ancient army and I want one as well. On the other hand, that decision is not as simple if you currently have an ancients army using a different scale. You need to pinpoint the specific reason why you're going to try a new scale while you currently have a force mix you can use for a game. One possible reason is cost. 6mm, in theory, is cheaper. While I discovered that a 6mm Napoleonic base of 12 6mm figures was not much cheaper than 4 15mm figures, this does depend on basing. The basing system I selected for ancients did result in lower costs. Another reason is it's easier to paint. Once again, this was not the case for my Napoleonics 6mm force mix, as I was painting 12 6mm figures for each 4 15mm figures. But for my selected ancients basing, it was much easier to paint. Another reason is the playing area is smaller, or I can have a larger battlefield depending on my playing area. This is a very good reason for selecting 6mm, although it does, once again, depend on basing. If you base 6mm on a 15mm base, there is no benefit in this area. This is especially the case if you base 6mm on a 25mm base, which some people do. All my 6mm are based on smaller bases, which means I can depict larger playing areas. This was the main reason I went down the 6mm path for ancients and Napoleonics. As a result, in conclusion, do your research when identifying an objective or reason for moving down the 6mm path. If you do not have a reason for your move into 6mm ancients, then it's unlikely you'll get much benefit from your new 6mm ancient army. I've attempted 6mm ancients 3 times. The first was not successful and I sold my figures. The bases in that case were too small, being 2 centimeters wide and 1 centimeter deep, and it was very hard to have a game. For my second attempt at 6mm ancients, I based them on a 3 centimeter square base, as you can see here, which is what I finally adopted for my Napoleonics, although now I'm having second thoughts. At least initially, for my 6mm Napoleonic figures, the 3 centimeter square basing system worked well, with a number of different Napoleonic rules. While I still mainly use 15mm Napoleonic figures, the 6mm figures still come out for an occasional game based on what I wish to achieve. Just as an afterthought, which I'll discuss in my next video, in the end I discovered that basing my 6mm on 3 centimeter square bases didn't give me any benefit. I've recently created a 15mm force mix using US basing, which for all extents and purposes gives me the same small base size as my 6mm figures and looks a lot better. What I'm currently thinking is I may adopt smaller elements or bases for my Napoleonics as I move forward. But anyway, that's a work in progress. In Ancients, I did actually come to a final conclusion what the best basing style was. At least initially, before I rebased my 15mm force mix using US basing, which incidentally is 2 centimeters wide, 3 centimeters deep, my 6mm Napoleon figures on a 3 centimeter square base allowed me to avoid movement trays, as each base is a self-contained unit, representing anything from a brigade to a division, depending on the rules you wish to use. This allows me to refight large battles on the same playing area size. I also do like the mass effect of 6mm. However, as I indicated earlier, I can now refight large battles on the same playing area size using 15mm figures. And whatever you may say about 6mm, 15mm figures do look a lot better. So, putting Napoleonics aside for the moment, when I based Ancients on a 3 centimeter square base, I had issues with the rules. I did find one set of rules which suited square elements, but that was a while ago and I could not find any opponents that wanted to play it, so it was not going to work. In the end, I discovered most common rules that were being used were DBA, DBM, DBMM, or rules which use similar basing. As I already have a 15mm Ancient Armies which uses standard 4cm wide bases, I saw no need to duplicate this with 6mm Ancients. I needed a reason to use 6mm figures versus 15mm figures, which meant I needed a unique basing system to give me a unique game experience. Basically, smaller bases to allow me to play on a smaller playing area. That was the real sweet spot. While I could try and search for rules which use 3cm square bases, I've come to the conclusion this type of basing does not work as well with Ancients as it does with World War II, Cold War, and even Napoleonics. In the world of Napoleonics, the different troop types are few and most units consisted of the same troop types. At the scale I was playing, it did not make much sense having skirmishers in front of my columns or lines, so the one unique unit style of game made sense for Napoleonics. In Ancients, the number of different troop types is significantly greater, and it was far more common for different troop types to work closely together. Skirmishers in front of the hoplites were common, as were bowmen behind spearmen in the Persian army. There are plenty of single troop type units, but a lot were also multi-troop type units. It was more difficult to simulate this with square bases. As a result, after much thought, I decided if I was going down the 6mm path, the benefit had to be the size of the playing area. That's my sweet spot. As a result, I've decided to base my Ancient on 3cm wide bases, but the depth varies from 1cm to 1.5cm or even 3cm in some rare cases. This was going back to the old WRG 15mm basing, which was common back in the 1970s and 1980s. The rules I mainly use these days is a hexless figure game version of the SPI pre-stag rules, or P17CW rules. This uses the concept of multi-element units, normally 3 foot or 2 mounted per unit. This also allows me to use these figures with DBA, DBM, DBMM, or even a DLG. One critical advantage with this basing with the P17CW rules is the size of the playing area. P17CW rules involve pre-battle manoeuvring, and as a result I need lots of real estate. 6mm figures allows me to do this. As with 15mm forces, I typically need a playing area of 4 by 6 feet to achieve the same thing. With 6mm I can get away with a 3 by 4 foot playing area, if not smaller. This allows me to remain seated for most of the game, which at my age is a big plus. The size of the playing area is critical for players considering a new scale. If players already have a 15mm or 25mm force mix and wish to move to another scale such as 6mm, there has to be a good reason, and one good reason is smaller playing areas or bigger battles on the same playing area. The playing area size is my key reason, which makes it worthwhile for me to go down the path of 6mm Ancients. In the end, I decided to get a new Kingdom Egyptian and Hittite army, as I've always liked chariots. As I use the DBMM army list for P17CW, the army I purchase can also be used with DBMM, DBM, and DBA, which is another important point. Whatever basing you select, make sure you've got a wide range of rules. When purchasing an army, you need to ensure it can be used with as many different sets of rules as possible, as the biggest issue is finding opponents, and you may find an opponent that may not like P17CW rules and may love DBMM. In my case, I have a ready supply of new players keen on trying new rules, especially simple rules, which is why I use P17CW rules. These rules are very simple and can be quickly picked up by any player within 10 minutes of an overview and a single game turn. This is certainly not the case with DBMM, or my previous favourite rules, DBM. Let's now drill into the basing system that I finally adopted. Strangely enough, it's based on the old WRG Napoleonics or WRG 6th edition Ancient Rules, which is a real blast from the past. What I found very odd was how I thought 3cm wide bases were so small when I re-looked at that size. Yet back in the 1980s, all my Ancients and Napoleonics were based in this manner. The mind can certainly play tricks after many years. The basic size of the infantry element is 3 centimeters wide by 1 centimeter deep. My older 6mm figures are H&R, so I normally place 5 close order troops on the base. My new figures are buckets, which come in strips of 4, so each base will contain only 4 figures per base. For open order troops such as Pisoli, I place 2 per base. While it could be possible to place 3 per base for troops such as Auxilia, I'll stay with 4 per base for that troop type. It is an option in DBMM, and I tend to like the close order Auxilia in the most part rather than order, but players can do whatever they wish. Just follow the DBMM guidelines is my strong advice if you're going down the Bacchus path. For cavalry and knights, I base 3 per base. I may consider placing 4 close order mounted, such as cataphractic troops, on a single base. Once again, DBMM basing style. For light horse, 2 figures per base is what I normally do. Once again, DBMM basing. For artillery, I normally place 1 figure on a crew on each base, and the base is 3 centimeters wide by 1.5 centimeters deep. For elements and chariots, I would try and use a 2 centimeter deep base. If I can fit them on a 1.5 centimeter deep base, I would do that as well. 3 centimeter deep bases may also work. It all depends on the figure. If it fits on, then it has to fit on. Incidentally, I use movement trays, so the depth is pretty important. That does affect gameplay. This rule only applies to P17CW, but I normally use movement trays which are a 3 centimeter square. For deeper elements, I may need to use some 4 centimeter deep bases, but this would be a minimal requirement. The reason for this is the unit composition. For rules such as DBMM and DBM, you don't need movement trays, although it does make life a lot easier, but you really don't need movement trays. Within each movement tray, a foot unit, that is a movement tray, which is a unit, consists up to 3 elements, which can all fit neatly into a 3 centimeter square base. In the case where skirmishers are allowed to mix with other troops, they would occupy one of the 3 slots, as you can see here. If your movement tray unit is a cavalry unit, then cavalry units only consist of 2 elements. Again, this is P17CW rules. Finally, in an ideal situation, elephants can form units with skirmishers. If the elements are too large and you need a 3 centimeter square base, then you may need a movement tray which is a bit deeper in order to accommodate the skirmishers. But you should be able to mix skirmishers with elements because generally that's the way it played. If you don't need to have skirmishers mixing with elements, then you don't need to worry about the deeper bases and just put one element or of elephants in the movement tray. Chariots do not normally form units consisting of other troop types, but in some cases they could coexist with skirmishers as well. However, in most cases chariots would consist of units of 2 elements as per cavalry, as long as you can fit them on the base, or for scythe chariots they would form units of only 1 element. Scythe chariot would be 3 by 3. Once again, it depends on the rules, but this system would also allow me to use the figures as I indicated before with DBM and DBMM. While P17CW works best with movement trays can also assist with other rules, making the movement of elements much simpler. However, I've tried to use movement trays with DBMM and DBM and it doesn't really quite work out, but nonetheless other players may have better luck than me. The movement trays I use are 4 centimeter square and allows me to place a 3 centimeter square element in it. This could be 3 by half centimeter or 3 by 1 centimeter elements or whatever combination makes sense. In this case what I'm showing is a movement tray with 2 elements in it, in this case horsemen or cavalry. In this example I've partially removed 1 element to show how they fit in the movement trays. In P17CW casualties are removed, so this may occur in some cases. This shows a side view of the same unit, with both elements partially removed. In this case the elements are light horse, with cavalry in the rear of the image. Let's move to infantry. This shows 2 elements of pike, with a Pisoli element in front of it. This shows the same unit from the front, with the elements partially removed from the movement tray. Here we see another view of the same element, in this case a side view of the unit, showing how the elements fit in the movement tray. This shows the unit of auxilia, with the elements partially removed from the tray. Each unit, or movement tray, consists of 3 elements of auxilia in this case. This shows the same auxilia unit from the side, and with the elements partially removed. In this case, you'll probably notice not all the units are in separate trays. This shows a 4-slot tray, which is used for a different set of rules. I only use these trays because I lacked sufficient individual 3 cm square trays when I had this game and took these photographs. I now have more than enough of the correct size trays. If you do not wish to purchase movement trays, you can make them yourself. All you need is a sheet of 3mm MDF from a hardware store, and with 3mm square balsa wood strips, which you cut out accordingly. All you need to do is cut 4 cm square bases, or you can purchase 4 cm square bases, whatever's easier for you. Then cut the 3mm square balsa strips into 2 4 cm lengths for the sides, and 2 3.4 cm lengths for the front. Glue and paint, I normally spray paint, and then you have your movement tray. These movement trays are used for Napoleonic blue shirt rules. They're not used for ancients. I'm only showing them to give you an example of how you can make these trays yourself. For my 6mm ancient army, or New Kingdom Egyptian army, which I have but I haven't yet based or painted, I normally use a 200-point army using DBMM point system, but when I deploy a larger playing area, I'll try a initially 300-point, but I've moved to a 400-point army. If we go with a 300-point army, we're talking about 60 figures, which using back as 6mm figures should be very affordable indeed. In my particular case, I'm mainly focusing on new players who do not possess any figures. I need an opponent, and the Hittite Empire is my choice, so I need to build up a second force mix for those new players. I can hardly wait to trundle around in my heavy Hittite chariots. So, in conclusion, I went for a smaller playing area or a bigger battle. But many other players adopt 6mm for the mass effect, which I admit does look nice. As long as you know where you're going, you have a chance of reaching the place you want to go to. And so this concludes episode 45 of my figure gaming hobby series of videos, in this case providing an overview of my new 6mm ancient force mix, or at least my new basing system. Alle guten Dinge kommen zu einem Ende.